We're going to break into Observers now to go live to Belgium, where Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, is speaking at the moment. Let's listen to what he has to say.
There's a lot of important work ahead of us.
Guys,
so let me turn to that
carré.
work and what we'll be focused on tomorrow. One topic at the top of our agenda is defense spending. We have robust plans in place to keep our 1 billion people safe in a more dangerous world. But we don't have all we need to implement them fully if required. Work is now underway to agree ambitious new defense capability goals for allies, the so-called capability targets, that will be key to ensuring we have the right people and equipment in place to deter and defend. And this requires that many allies, especially in Europe and Canada, invest considerably more. We know what needs to be done. And we are moving in the right direction, step by step. European allies have been stepping up. Today, I'm pleased to share our latest figures. Since the 2014 Defence Investment Pledge, European allies and Canada have added more than 700 billion additional US dollars for defense. In 2024, NATO allies in Europe and Canada invested 485 billion US dollars in defense, a nearly 20% increase compared with 2023. With a full two-thirds of allies spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense. I expect even more allies to meet and, in many cases, exceed the target in 2025. So we are seeing substantial progress. But we need to do a lot more so we have what needs to deter and defend. And so there is a more equitable burden sharing in place. We also need to produce more together. And tomorrow, Defence Ministers will discuss how to strengthen our transatlantic defence industrial capacity, including through an updated Defence Production Action Plan. In the past few years, we have seen a substantial increase in defence production across the alliance. But we need to go further and faster. There's no time to waste. I also expect ministers to agree on a number of other important initiatives, including our new commercial space strategy and on further strengthening NATO's integrated air and missile defense. We also discuss Ukraine. Tomorrow afternoon, we will meet in the NATO Ukraine Council with Defence Minister Rustem Umerov and the EU High Representative Kaja Kallas. Since 2022, NATO allies have provided Ukraine with unprecedented support, including 99% of all military aid. And we have seen recent additions to this from, let's say, Sweden, Finland, Canada, but also, of course, from France, the Mirages and the F-16s from the Netherlands. Other allies are also stepping up their efforts to train more Ukrainian troops. NATO's newly established command in Wiesbaden to support Ukraine is at the forefront of coordinating these and future contributions. At the Washington summit, allies pledged to provide Ukraine with 40 billion euros of security assistance in 2024. Allies have not only met their commitments, they far exceeded them. They have provided over 50 billion euros, more than half of which comes from European allies and Canada. This sends a clear signal of our unwavering commitment to Ukraine. It also takes a big step in the direction of what President Trump has called for. I agree with him that we must equalize security assistance to Ukraine. But to really change the trajectory of the conflict, we need to do even more. The stronger Ukraine is on the battlefield, the stronger they will be at the negotiating table, the greater the chances of getting a good deal for lasting peace. And that is what we all want for Ukraine, for our shared security, and for our global stability. Finally, we will address Russia's ongoing campaign of destabilizing actions against NATO allies. We see acts of sabotage assassination, dangerous jamming of civilian airlines, and attacks on critical infrastructure, including undersea infrastructure. And NATO is responding, including through Baltic Sentry in the Baltic Sea and with increased vigilance across the board. With that, I'm ready to take your questions.
All right, we'll start with CNN.
Good afternoon.
Oh, microphone. Class Bastian from CNN. How do you interpret the comments that we heard from President Trump on Monday that Ukraine may someday be Russian? Do you take it seriously? And even if you don't, how worried are you that this makes Western commitment to Ukraine appear fragile in Moscow's eyes and could undermine future security guarantees?
We are intensely coordinating with President Trump's team at all levels, and these are very good conversations. This week we have many senior American officials visiting Europe, here at NATO, but also, of course, in Munich at the security conference. There is a convergence of views that we have to make sure, one, that Ukraine gets in the best possible position to start talks. Two, to make sure that whatever comes out of those talks, and when that will happen, that we have to be sure collectively and assure collectively that what comes out of it is durable. So no repeat of what we had with the Minsk agreement in 2014.
All right, Reuters.
Secretary General Andrew Gray from Reuters, you said that the assistance needs to be equalized, assistance to Ukraine between the United States and other allies, but you've just given figures that show the majority of that aid comes from other allies, not from the United States. So how much of a rebalancing does there actually need to be? And secondly, on the same theme, you said in Davos that if the Trump administration is willing to continue supplying American weapons, Europe will pick up the bill. How many European leaders have agreed to do that, and have they told you where the money will come from?
Well, first of all, we are on the right trajectory, indeed, when it comes to the aim of equalizing what the US basically decides as a one nation within NATO comparable to all the other allies within NATO, so that we are equalizing. And here we see that Canada and Europe are even over 50% now, so that is good. But we have to maintain that trajectory. That's crucial, and I completely concur with President Trump and his team that this is the only sensible way forward. Then, of course, to the question of future support for Ukraine, no doubt there will be a debate, I expect, between allies, who is going to pay for it, where it comes from, etc. But there is also a large agreement between all allies that we have to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs in terms of training, in terms of military equipment, to make sure that whenever peace talks start, they can do that from a position of strength.
All right, Sky News.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Haynes from Sky News. Donald Trump has repeatedly called on European NATO allies to spend more on defence, and he's also made clear that his priorities for security are facing up to the threat posed by China and defending America's own borders. How confident are you, therefore, that America would come to Europe's aid if European NATO allies came under attack, and could European allies alone defend themselves?
I think my reaction needs to have two elements. First of all, on the defense spending. President Trump has consistently asked for the Europeans to do more. We had a pledge in Wales in 2014, and basically not a lot happened after 2014. And it really started to take off when he was president in post-2016, 2017, and particularly in 2018, 2019, up to today, including the 20% increase, 23 compared to 24. US, NATO allies, so excluding the US, Canada and the EU, paying 20% more. And we have to continue this. The good thing is that what we have in place now is a process based on NATO's defense planning process, which will lead to clarity on what needs to be done to keep us safe, the capability targets. From there, we will see where the gaps are. We know already that it probably will be in the area of missile defense, air missile defense, in the area of logistics, military mobility, long-range weapons, but also to increase the strength of our armies. Yes, the Navy and of course our Air Force, but particularly when it comes to our armies, we'll have to do more, including making sure that they can fight prolonged wars, and that they will be more heavily armed, including with tanks. And all this costs money. We are now getting those numbers on the table, and this is the big difference with 2014. There it was, let's do 2%. Now we will have a content-driven debate. How do we fill the gap between where we are and where we have to be? And I expect this to be north of 3%, I said before, but I'm not committing to a number now because we are still at the early stage in exactly coming to the details. And then on Europe and the rest of the world, I think when we discuss this with our American colleagues within NATO, there is a clear joint assessment that what happens in Ukraine or what happens in Europe, and particularly now in Ukraine, is not only Russia-Ukraine or Russia-Europe. It also involves North Korea, China, Iran. So there is an interconnection now between what happens in the North Atlantic and in the Euro-Atlantic area on the one hand, but also in the Pacific on the other hand. And that means that all these theaters are getting intertwined. And that means from a strategic point of view, we have to make sure that we assess them like this. But I completely understand that the Americans want the European.
Sorry about that. We do seem to be having some difficulty there listening to the head of NATO, Mark Rutte. Speaking just moments ago, he said that NATO does need to do a lot more on defense spending. His comments today coming at the opening of that defense ministers meeting, which will be attended by the U.S. Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. He's already at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. The Trump administration, of course, looking to push European nations to take more responsibility for the war in Ukraine.